Afternoon. I absolutely love to see the fellowship and interaction, but if everyone will find our seats, we'll get going on this very interesting topic. Thank you all for being here. Miss Sasha, would you please call the roll?
Senator Boswell, Senator Funky Fromeyer, Senator Gardler, Senator Howe, Senator Maiden,
Here.
Senator Nunn,
Here.
Senator Thomas,
Here.
Senator Wilson,
Use your microphone this time.
Senator Wise, Senator Yates,
Present.
Representative Baker,
Here.
Representative Chester Burton, Representative Dotson,
Here.
Representative Pfister,
Here.
Representative Fugit,
Here.
Representative Grossberg,
Present.
Representative Grossel,
Here.
Representative Hodgson,
Here.
Representative Kulkarni, Representative Lawrence, Representative Lehman, Representative Lewis,
Here.
Representative Marzian,
Here.
Representative McPherson,
Here.
Representative Moore,
Here.
Representative Pollock,
Here.
Representative Tackett Lafferty, Representative Tate, Representative Thompson, Representative Truitt,
Here.
Representative Watkins, Representative Wesley,
Here.
Representative Whitaker,
Here.
Representative White,
Here.
Representative Wilson, Representative Witten,
Here.
Co-Chair Wheeler,
Here.
Co-Chair Gordon,
Yes.
Co-Chair King.
Present. We do have a quorum. Excellent attendance on this hot July 31st afternoon. Thank you all for making the effort to be here today. Do we have a motion and a second on our June minutes? Do you have both of those? We have those. All in favor of the June minutes, please acknowledge that with saying aye. Thank you very much. We have, I think, an excellent presentation. Really been looking forward to this for several months. If we will have our first presenter, Mr. Brandon Howard, and any guest, please come to the table. We're going to be talking about prescribed burns, how that works in Kentucky, and I have two excellent presenters on that. Yes, you'll probably need to pull that mic pretty close to you. Push the little button until the light illuminates. Please introduce yourselves for the record and start with your presentation. Thank you again for being here.
Good afternoon. I'm Dawn Basie with the Department for Natural Resources Commissioner's Office.
Good afternoon. Brandon Howard. I'm the director of the Kentucky Division of Forestry, and I also serve as Kentucky State Forester.
Very good. Thank you both for being here. Please proceed.
All right. Well, I want to thank you all for the opportunity to discuss prescribed fire with you. As I said, I'm the director of the Division of Forestry and serve as Kentucky State Forester. So all 50 states have someone who serves as State Forester, and I'm happy to serve as Kentucky State Forester. And also I want to take a moment just to mention my professional background. I received my Bachelor of Science degree in forestry from the University of Kentucky, and my service to Kentucky state government spans 21 years, all with the Division of Forestry. Over the course of my career, I've participated in wildfire suppression in 12 states outside of Kentucky, and also I've directly participated in Kentucky wildfire suppression efforts on nearly 500 wildfires. So I'm hopeful that my boots on the ground experience, I can effectively describe the importance of prescribed fire for you today. So I felt it was appropriate to start off the discussion with the Division of Forestry's mission statement. We strive to protect, conserve, and enhance Kentucky's forest resources, and how we reach this goal is through a public informed of the environmental, social, and economic impact of these resources. Specifically, prescribed fire accomplishes this mission through hazardous fuel reduction and promoting oak regeneration. So I'm going to discuss these topics further as we move through the presentation. So prescribed fire is known by other names such as RX fire or controlled burn. It's important to understand that prescribed fire is intentionally set, but under specific parameters. These parameters are carefully planned and target specific goals. Certain control measures must be in place throughout the entire process and implemented by trained personnel. The name prescribed fire is most often used because it is a treatment for the land. Land managers prescribe treatments to improve the health and status of our forest in a variety of ways. A controlled application of fire is one of these tools, and it is an efficient and it's an effective tool. So I plan to discuss several desired outcomes when prescribed fire is used over the next few slides. Wildfire and prescribed fire have an obvious similarity, the flame. However, the two are vastly different. As I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, I've been witness to the destruction of wildfire. Every year, the brave employees of the Division of Forestry encounter uncertain danger as they suppress the wildfires, as they suppress the wildfires as they occur within the Commonwealth. Wildfire is unplanned. While we have tools to help us understand when fire growth potential is high, we don't know when or where a fire will occur or will start. Wildfire can be intense and can be destructive to our state's beautiful landscape. I've been standing at a wildfire before and witnessed the fire's rage as it climbed up trees and jumped roads, only to continue raging on. Prescribed fire, on the other hand, is thoughtfully planned and the intensity is managed. I will discuss throughout this presentation the thoughtful planning in more detail later in the presentation. It's key to remember that prescribed fire is prescribed because it is deemed beneficial to the landscape. As you are aware, KRS 149.520 established a statewide system of forest fire prevention, forest fire detection, and forest fire suppression. In the next few slides, I'll discuss how fire prevention is accomplished through hazardous fuel reduction. By embracing prescribed fire as fire prevention, this allows our agency to meet our mandate of fire prevention. The reduction of hazardous fuels can be accomplished in more than one way. For example, mechanical reduction of hazardous fuels involves heavy equipment manually removing the fuels that create severe wildfire situations. The problem with mechanical treatments is that it's primarily its costs are too great, and the efficiency is lowered. So, but not to forget to mention the impact on the land of having mechanical equipment in the forest. That's another reason why prescribed fire is a valuable tool for hazardous fuel reduction. Prescribed fire will consume the hazardous fuel in a safe and efficient manner. The fuel load on a site, which means the amount of concentrated organic material, directly impacts the intensity of a wildfire. If we can achieve a lighter fuel load, we experience less intense wildfire. If a consistent prescribed fire regime can be established across Kentucky, any wildfire that occurs will be positively impacted by the presence of lighter fuels. This is especially true in our highest wildfire-prone areas of eastern Kentucky. Ultimately, a lower hazardous fuel load improves firefighter safety. Another important reason to reduce hazardous fuel is because high-intensity wildfires negatively impact Kentucky's timber resources. The forest industry in Kentucky contributes a total economic impact of $19 billion, according to the University of Kentucky. It is important for us to strive to protect such a valuable industry for Kentucky. To help grasp an understanding of wildfire activity we experience in Kentucky, I felt it was important to share some of our annual wildfire statistics with you. Kentucky's annual wildfire average is 838 in number of occurrences and nearly 29,000 acres when averaged over a 10-year span. Our state doesn't always stick to the averages, though. In 2022, we battled 1,246 wildfires, and in 2016, wildfires consumed 71,158 acres of forest in our state. Kentucky has two wildfire seasons, one in the fall and one in the spring. Wildfires in Kentucky mostly fall within a 5-month window. Prescribed fire not only reduces hazardous fuels, it is a tool that promotes oak regeneration. The oak tree is a vital part of our ecosystem and of our economy. There are many oak species in Kentucky, but one I'll focus on today is the white oak. The species of white oak is critical to Kentucky's $9 billion bourbon industry because white oak is the only wood that can be used in barrel production. Prescribed fire reduces competition from other species that are less desirable. Many of the undesirable species are thin-barked trees and are more susceptible to damage from fire. This allows all oak species to thrive. It is important to note that we plan today for the barrels that are created and produced 80 years from now. Another statute to discuss is KRS 149.175. This legislation exempts prescribed fire practitioners from Kentucky's burn restrictions during wildfire seasons that I just mentioned. These practitioners are exempt only if they are certified by the Kentucky Prescribed Burn Council's Burn Boss program. Even with these exemptions in place, no one can burn during red flag warnings or local burn bans. A red flag warning is issued by the National Weather Service and represents a time period when weather is most conducive to wildfire growth. Also, Kentucky law allows local jurisdictions to implement burn bans when warranted. When such a burn ban is in place, a practitioner is prohibited from implementing a prescribed fire in any such county. KRS 149.175 also sets a notification requirement of 24 hours, and I'll discuss that a little further in a couple slides. So the prescribed burn process involves the Kentucky Certified Burn Boss completing a comprehensive burn plan prior to implementing a prescribed fire. This is an instrumental component of the process that lays the foundation of planning for every prescribed fire. Once the plan is complete and weather parameters meet the prescription, a decision to implement the burn is made. From there, the burn boss will email the Division of Forestry the plan, and that serves as the required 24-hour notification in advance of the burn. A certified burner has more responsibilities than just notifying the Division of Forestry. On the morning of the burn, they must contact adjacent landowners, local dispatch, and Division of Air Quality. In addition to the 24-hour burn notification, the burn boss will call the Division of Forestry office to give an update on final plans. It's also an excellent opportunity to discuss weather for the day. Such weather topics could include wind and smoke diversion because weather plays a vital role in the decision-making process when implementing a prescribed fire. And finally, on the day following the burn boss should contact the Division of Forestry office and describe the status of the burn along with the amount of acreage that was burned in the previous day. So finally, I want to thank you for the opportunity to discuss prescribed fire with you today. Hopefully, I've been able to properly describe the importance of prescribed fire in Kentucky. I feel that it is a tool that can be used to effectively and efficiently help us all protect, conserve, and enhance the forest resources of our great state. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that excellent background and getting us the basic information to help us understand this very necessary management tool. We do have a second set of presenters. I know we are getting questions coming in, but to get the complete lay of the land, if you will, I guess pun intended, if our next presenters could come up and we'll get your presentation and then we'll take all of those questions at the same time at the completion of our second presenters. Give them a moment to change slides. Oh, thank you. Thank you. We'll let you get set, and thank you for transferring over our PowerPoint presentations. We'll let you get set. Same thing, if you'll pull the microphones fairly close to you, push that little button so the light is illuminated. Please introduce yourself for the record and give us your presentation. We appreciate you being here.
Commissioner Rich Storm.
Ben Robinson. I'm the Director of Wildlife for the Department of Fish and Wildlife.
I'm Jenny Gilbert. I'm the Legislative Liaison.
I'll be brief in my introductory comments, but it's rare that I get in front of this many members of the General Assembly, and I'd like to personally thank you all for what you've done for the pension and I'm sure you don't get that very often, but you all have to make tough decisions on the budget. You all took an agency that was on the road to insolvency, and through responsible leadership, you've paid that pension burden down and created an opportunity for us to, number one, be competitive, but number two, have a future without needing to be bailed out. So I say a sincere thank you for the decisions you all made to make that happen. I will say, as a commissioner of Kentucky Fish and Wildlife, we're the envy of many states for a lot of reasons. Habitat, it's no wonder that people bring horses here and people desire to live here. We have a lot of things to be thankful for, but we finish in first place in natural resources. And then there's multiple benefits to prescribed fire. Obviously, fire prevention's been discussed, but there's a lot of parts of Kentucky that we can't take tractors, we can't take equipment, and we can burn, and we can provide that critical habitat thereafter. And then, unfortunately, we have a lot of invasive species that we have to deal with, and this can oftentimes eliminate that seed bank. And then, when I became commissioner, I tasked staff simply, let's burn as much as we possibly can where we have permission, and let's create that ideal habitat so that we can achieve our mission. And that's my spiel. I'll turn it over to Ben. Thank you all.
Well, thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, committee. It's really great to be here. And Chairwoman King, if you don't mind, I've got 3 guests here I'd like to recognize in the crowd as well.
Absolutely.
So we've got Mr. Jacob Stewart, Mr. Cody Roden, and Mr. James Woods. And these are really 3 of our experts that work on our staff, and they really know prescribed fire and did a lot of the legwork to help get us here today. So just want to make sure they were recognized.
Absolutely. Thank all 3 of you, and we appreciate your your diligence, expertise in joining us today. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Absolutely.
Robinson.
So it's an honor to be here. You know, I'm really excited to talk about something that I'm very passionate about, and that's prescribed fire. And you know, I've been doing prescribed fire now for over 20 years, both professionally and personally. You know, I've been in all levels and all roles of fire professionally, but I also manage my own properties with prescribed fire as a management tool, and we'll talk a little bit more about why we do that moving forward. So Director Howard gave us a really good introduction to what prescribed fire is and some of the benefits of fire, and really focused on a lot of the fire prevention and wildfire prevention and forest management. And I wanted to elaborate a little bit more on some of the benefits of fire for wildlife and for the ways that the Department of Fish and Wildlife uses fire. And you'll see a couple photos there, one being a wild turkey and the bottom being some bobwhite quail. And those are 2 iconic species that we manage for, and those are 2 species that rely heavily on the habitat or the homes created from the use of prescribed fire. You'll see that photo at the bottom as well, and that's maybe a little bit hard to see, but on the left side of that photo is some row crop agriculture. You know, that's a cornfield there. Obviously, we're not using fire to manage the corn, but we're using fire to manage the ground in between, and you can see what that looks like. That's a really nice, lush grassland area. No trees. Obviously, this producer did not want trees in that area, and that's one advantage of using fire from a management perspective. You can keep saplings and trees and things like that out of fields. You can burn areas that, as the commissioner alluded to, that may not be conducive to getting equipment on, maybe wet ground. Believe it or not, you can burn wet ground as well. But obviously, that photo there shows what some of the high-quality forage that can come back that both wildlife and agricultural animals, cattle, can benefit from. And then we talked already a little bit about some of the forest management benefits of prescribed fire. So I won't go into much more detail on that, other than we use fire often on our wildlife management areas to help manage our forests, to help promote oak growth. You know, we talked about the economic benefits of oak earlier to our bourbon industry, our timber industry, but to the wildlife industry, oaks are very, very important when you think about the mast or the food that's created from oak trees and the acorns that so many species depend on. So we use fire often to promote that oak community, and it's one of the best tools that we have. So we've talked a lot about the benefits of fire and how we utilize fire, but I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about an organization that you may or may not be aware of, and that's the Kentucky Prescribed Fire Council. And the Kentucky Prescribed Fire Council You can see the mission statement there in green. It's to promote understanding and enhance collaboration for the use of ecologically based prescribed fire in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And this organization is really growing, and we've got a lot of a good membership there, made up of landowners, academia, or universities around the state, local governments, state government. Department of Fish and Wildlife is an active participant in the Fire Council. We've got federal agencies, we've got non-governmental organizations, we've got private businesses, and we've got contractors that are all a part of this. And really the only requirement to join the Fire Council is to have an interest in prescribed fire. You know, whether you're wanting to learn how to do it and be educated, whether you're wanting to promote the use of fire, or if you're just a firebug and just love setting things on fire, then we welcome you. So the Fire Council really growing though, and we'll talk a little bit more about what the Fire Council does. So a quick overview of kind of a timeline in the history of the Fire Council. So Fire Council was established in 2008. And when the Fire Council was initially established, right out of the gate, we recognized there were a few roadblocks in place for prescribed fire across Kentucky. And to kind of set that framework, if you're familiar with prescribed fire in some of our surrounding states, particularly states to the south, you get into states like Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, prescribed fire it's a very common tool in those states. They burn a lot of ground, and it's in the culture. It's ingrained in the management culture there. It's nothing to drive down the roads and see smoke coming out of woods or fields, and you don't think anything about it. You don't call and report those fires because it's in that culture. Kentucky's not there, but that's kind of what we're aspiring to be, is to really get there from a management perspective. So when we're comparing ourselves to those other states, we said we've got some roadblocks and some challenges before us, to break down to get there. The first being a limited workforce capacity. When we first started the Fire Council, there just weren't a lot of people doing prescribed fire. There was no contractor base. There was a lot of people weren't trained properly to do it. So we realized we needed to address that. There's a shortage of certified burn bosses, and we'll touch on what a certified burn boss is here in just a second, but essentially a burn boss is just what it sounds like. It's the person that bosses the fire. They're responsible for all aspects of leading the fire, leading the crew, all the preparation that goes into it, making sure the weather is accurate and adequate. Really had a shortage of those. We had low landowner awareness, so a lot of folks just didn't know about fire. They didn't know that fire was even a thing, in a good way, in a positive way. Didn't know that it was a management tool that could be used for a whole lot of reasons. So we wanted to break that barrier down. And then last, the liability concerns that we'll touch on here later. So really quickly, just talking about how the Fire Council has worked to overcome some of these roadblocks that I just mentioned. The first being the limited workforce capacity. To respond to this, the Fire Council created what we term our 8-hour training. So this can be anybody in this room. Maybe after this, you're like, I've got an interest in learning a little bit more about fire. So you can sign up for this 8-hour course, and that's exactly what it is. It's an 8-hour crash course where we're going to teach you, everything we can teach you in 8 hours about fire and get you comfortable. And you're not going to be at the burn boss level at this point, but you're going to be trained up to be a helpful crew member to somebody after this training. And that was first really developed in 2012. You can see from the chart here, had a little bit of a lapse getting this up and running, but really got it off and going around 2021. And in that short time period, we've got over 510 people that have went through these trainings. And it sounds like a small number, but it's actually a pretty good sized number for kind of more of a niche market and a smaller market when you're talking about prescribed fire. So we're pretty excited about that 510 number there of folks. So limited workforce capacity, first barrier. Feel like we're making good progress towards that. Second roadblock, the shortage of certified burn bosses that I talked about. And Director Howard mentioned this a little bit, some of the exemptions that are available, to burn outside of fire seasons and things like that. So if you go through all of the proper trainings and field experience, then you can get to the certified burn boss level, which then grants you some exemptions to be able to burn at times when maybe others can't. A lot of responsibility on a certified burn boss. You'll see that photo there on the right is a burn plan template. A burn plan, detailed planning goes into every prescribed burn that we put on, and this is everything from the number of crew needed, the resources needed, fire suppression, the amount of water you need, the weather parameters, all of those things go into a burn plan, and then all that responsibility comes back ultimately on the certified burn boss. By the time it's all said and done, when you reach this status, you've been through, we estimate somewhere around 160 hours of field time and class time, so you can see it's a pretty big responsibility, but you're very well trained when you get to this status. 2018 was the first certified burn boss workshop that the Fire Council did. And since that time, we've got over 187 certified burn bosses. Again, that's a great number. Again, seems like maybe not a huge number, but it's a pretty good number there when you're approaching 200 certified burn bosses around the state. And that interest is still growing, so we hope to see that number continue to climb. So again, roadblock 2, shortage of certified burn bosses. I feel like we're making really good progress on that. Third roadblock is low landowner awareness. And, I touched on this earlier. That could mean anything from just not knowing about fire to not knowing how to get trained in fire. So this one kind of pairs up with the 8-hour training course that I talked about initially. Once you've been through that 8-hour class, if you're anything like me, I can sit through a class all day and maybe not absorb everything. I've got to get out on the ground and go hands-on to really learn, and that's what this is. This is an opportunity through these learn and burn courses to come out and you actually join in with a trained crew and you get to participate in live fire. You get to put fire on the ground. And these have been extremely well received. And the first learn and burn that we did was in 2023. And you can see there, we've had over 220 participants run through these learn and burn classes. And most of these, granted, these are on Saturdays, so you've really got to be interested and want to go to these. So that's a pretty good number, 220. You'll see that map there. The shaded counties have directly been impacted by one of our trainings of some sort. We've got almost coverage across the whole state, so our goal is to fill this whole map in, make sure that every county's got coverage and has some folks that are trained up and interested in burning. So third roadblock, that low landowner awareness. I feel like we're doing pretty good with that, making progress. So to pull all of our timeline together, you'll see here the 2 boxes that just popped in. These are the statutes, the fire statutes, a couple of them in Kentucky, 149-400 and 149-175. And the main reason we wanted to add these is just to show that when changes have been made to fire laws and fire legislation, the Fire Council promptly responds and is ready to act and ready to make progress on any of the legislation that comes about. So that fourth one, liability concerns are a major barrier, and that's kind of what I want to close out with and touch on that. And rewind back to the examples I gave earlier about some of our southern states that really burn a lot and have that culture. The one thing that we have found that they have that we don't are liability protections for their burners. Some type of laws in place that when these folks are doing everything right, they've been through the proper trainings, they've got their certifications, and they go out and burn, that there are some laws on the books that then provide them some liability protections. And that's one thing that's really holding, I think, fire back in Kentucky. The other thing that they have in those states that we don't are a really strong economy around fire. They have a contractor base. And if you don't mind to back up one slide for me there, touch on a couple of these for just a second, but they have a really strong contractor base. They have private businesses that are up and running that do this prescribed fire for people. They employ a lot of crew members. So we feel like that some clearer laws around prescribed fire really could increase participation, build up that contractor base. Obviously, we've talked about the benefits of fire, reduce risk of wildfire. That's why we want to get more fire on the ground. So, okay, Jenny. And building a little more on the economic opportunity and really unlocking that full potential of fire. Again, the contractor industry growth, the rural job creation that this can create when you have these contractors in place and these paid members on fire crews could be really big. It could be really important. Other states are a model and they're showing that it works. We feel like we're leaving some money on the table here, and there is money available. There's millions of dollars available when you look at federal farm bill programs that are available to landowners. There's money available there to funnel back to landowners who use fire as a management tool. The problem is right now they just don't always have a mechanism to get fire in place because they may not want to do it themselves. They may want to hire somebody to be able to do it. So in closing, kind of where do we go from here? These are just some take-home messages. Controlled burning, it's not wildfire. In fact, it's quite different, and that's really what we're trying to prevent. With more prescribed fire, typically equals less wildfire. Prescribed fire is safe. It's a science-based tool. And as you can see, Kentucky's come a long way with prescribed fire, with the formation of the Fire Council and the progress that's been made there. But we feel like there's still a ways to go, and there's a lot of opportunities still out there. So with that, thank you once again for the opportunity to be here. And Chairwoman King, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much. Excellent, excellent information. If as many professionals as you would like to come up to the table, we are getting a really good queue of questions,
Right.
and then I have a page full myself, so I don't know who you want up there, and even if someone is
I'll tell you
in
what, if
the
we can,
audience, we can
yeah,
always
Director Howard
call
can
them
come up, and then if I stumble, I may call on some of my experts back here that are sitting behind me. So
Excellent. Well, I am completely fascinated with this topic and sincerely appreciate you all being here today. I am going to defer to member questions first. I would love for them to have the opportunity to ask the questions that I may in a moment, and we will start with Representative Grossberg.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I have three what I believe are very brief questions on this outstanding presentation. The first, I'm not terribly concerned about carbon emission from the prescribed burns, but what happens with long-term carbon capture when we reduce the old growth in such large scale?
yeah, so Director Howard, do you want to touch on that from a forest management perspective, and then I can.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. The prescribed fire consumes the fuel on the forest floor, whether it be large, down woody debris, light fuels such as leaf litter. And so the goal with prescribed fire is to prevent the fire to becoming so intense that it's going to damage the large trees. The large trees are fairly resistant to wildfire, or resistant to prescribed fire. You know, it's wildfire and the severity of wildfire that changes that. And so I would think that the absence of the mature trees would be what you're concerned about, and prescribed fire will actually do a better job of being able to protect the mature trees.
Thank you. That did clarify that for me. The next is what happens to the wildlife. I mean, I live in the city of Louisville, and I can't do any landscaping on my home without disturbing bunnies or squirrels or something like that. Here we're talking about hundreds of acres at a time. What happens to the displaced wildlife? And we have, I don't know that we have endangered species in Kentucky, but we have some near endangered ones that I just have some concern.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And so it kind of goes back to piggyback on what Mr. Howard just talked about. It's really the wildfire that's more concerning to our wildlife than the prescribed fire. The prescribed fire, it's so low intensity, and the way we ignite these, we have different ignition patterns and objectives for our fires. So we really try to keep that intensity low. We're never just ripping large fires across an area to really put a lot of wildlife in danger. So what we see on nearly every burn is the way we light these things, we leave gaps and we leave openings, and you see wildlife vacating really quickly from those burn units. But the interesting thing is they're back really quick because they love the regrowth that comes back. We've got a lot of folks from a hunting perspective that intentionally burn their properties. They burn their fields and woods ahead of turkey season because the turkeys will pile in there into these areas with new regrowth, with all the bugs that come back. So very short-term loss for long-term gains from that perspective.
Well, that's very reassuring. I think I have to watch one of these to fully understand. And, you know, the photos are great, but it's not the same. The last one is, you spoke about oak regeneration in terms of competing with the invasive species. How do you control at that point that it's oak regenerating? And you showed lots of pictures of oak saplings and not the invasive species taking over that ripe environment of high ash, low overgrowth, et cetera.
So historically, the reason we have such good oak that we have now in Kentucky is likely a result of a fire regime that existed when these trees began. And so with the invasive exotic species that come in, they're not used to this. They're not fire tolerant in most cases. Now, you'll find some outliers, but for the most part, these trees such as the bush honeysuckle, things like that, or thin barked trees. And if you can, consistently have a prescribed fire regime, and then it's going to lower their persistence. And then your other trees, your oak trees, that's just what they thrive in. Whether it's a mature tree, they have a thicker bark, and even saplings have thicker bark on oak trees than do some other of these invasive species, and undesirable native species as well. There's certain red maples that red maple is nice, but we don't want a forest of red maple. There's a lot of different reasons that we probably won't go into today. We could take up the rest of the meeting on that. But so for the most part, this is taking us in the right direction.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Speaker, for indulging me with 3 questions.
Of course. Co-Chair Wheeler.
Thank you, Chairman King. Is this essentially, I guess, we've seen all the wildfires out in California and everything, and seen some of the back and forth between the governor out there and then I guess the president about how we need to clear the brush. Is this essentially what we're talking about with these controlled fires? I mean, is it when I guess the president says they need to clear out all the undergrowth? Is that what we're talking about here?
So I'm not familiar with the exact situation that's going on in California, or where this discussion, what they're actually talking about in that particular situation. But from a Kentucky perspective, if we can lower the fuel, then that's going to lower the fire intensity. So fuel comes in a lot of different factors. It could be leaf litter, annual leaf litter. It could be compounded leaf litter from over years. It could be the tornado damage possibly that we've recently seen. If that sets for a while and it gets cured, then that can create a problem because it's a heavy fuel load. So certainly in Kentucky, if we can change the fuel dynamic, then we certainly can, it'll be positive for being able to resist intense wildfire activity.
And I guess just as a brief follow-up, I mean, I have read occasionally about where you can't have one of these things, even a controlled fire, get out of control and become a wildfire. I guess when you're talking about wanting liability protections, I mean, I kind of think even if the cabinet starts a fire and burns down somebody's house, they ought to pay for it. That doesn't really seem fair to me that the person who suffers the loss has to bear the brunt of that. I mean, you're not proposing not leaving them with any type of redress if y'all accidentally start a fire and burn down somebody's house or property, are you?
So I'll chime in on your previous and your current question. So I had the pleasure to go camping at the Grand Canyon with my daughters and wife, and they did such a nice job out there of raking up all the fuel and strategically burning. And so there wasn't much that could catch fire. Secondly, one of the reasons we're here today, and I would think we would all agree on this, that with property insurance, property casualty insurance for these burn bosses, then they could cover any possible damages that would result from, an accidental situation. But again, with the training that these folks have, it would be a rare occurrence, but we would certainly ask that if these laws could be changed, that adequate insurance be required for these burn bosses or these burn contractors.
Okay, and I guess, although I guess the Grand Canyon, they recently lost their, almost century-old lodge out there to a fire, did they not?
You are right on that, and I will say the fires, it hardly ever rains out there, but when I was there, I noticed there was just virtually no fuel. I was on the South Rim, which is the most common tourist attraction. That fire was on the North Rim, so I couldn't really speak to whether or not they were managing that the same way, but indeed that happened, but it is prime for a wildfire out there because it's hot and it rarely ever rains.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Of course. Senator Maiden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Storm, I just want to take a second to thank you for, I wasn't expecting to see Ben again today. I met with him Monday in Bell County, and I just wanted to reiterate that I appreciate the staff that you sent and board members, and of course I'm sure Ben shared with you our discussion on our situation with our bear there in Bell County. But my question is more back on like the first slide that you showed. Naturally, we have a tremendous amount of turkey, but over the past 10, 15 years, I always have a lot of bird hunters say we don't have the number of quail that we used to have. Is that, do y'all acknowledge that? Do y'all re-entry any of those back into the area? Or, but we used to have a lot of bird hunters, but they don't really do that anymore.
I think we would both like to chime in. If I may, Eastern Kentucky's changed dynamically. I worked there for a number of years, and I think we can all agree there's far less grass than there used to be. So that key habitat that we all love and that we all desire is needed, and we've lost a tremendous amount of that in southeastern Kentucky. The second thing that I find interesting, we stocked, I think, approximately 3 million quail statewide for a number of years. These were pen-raised birds. I hope my staff agrees with me in my synopsis on this, but we truly took the hybrid vigor out of quail by introducing pen-raised birds. And so a loss of key habitat plus loss of hybrid vigor, we created circumstances that are less than optimal. But if you do a simple AI search on conservation, you're going to find one of the top things is loss of habitat. And every time somebody builds a house, develops a subdivision, builds a factory, pave a road, you just lost an opportunity for wildlife to reproduce. So we have a multitude of factors that are huge. In fact, I hope I can meet with everybody on this committee and discuss that difficulty. So I would say to each person here, the expectations should change somewhat, but also remember, and this is my last point, we just finished stocking turkey and deer and elk in the last 25 or so years. And so we're seeing a population curve and a change, but the one thing that's constant is change. But thank you.
No, I mean, well said, Commissioner. And just to piggyback on that a little bit, I wish, that was a good segue to say that we just finished stocking quail or turkeys and elk and deer, and they've been very successful. But unfortunately, and a lot of the research shows it, improves it, that restocking quail, pen-raised quail, is just not successful. They just don't survive, have a very low survival. And again, we proved that by putting out millions and seeing where we're at. And unfortunately, the biggest issue with quail is it's a habitat issue, habitat loss. When quail were really booming and thriving in the 60s and 70s, that was kind of the last heyday of quail, and they've been going downhill since, slowly, but they were really a product of agriculture. So when you think about how our agriculture's changed, you had a lot more small family farming, you had fallow fielding, you had things like that, and absolutely no slight on agriculture. We have to advance and we have to modernize, and that's what we've done. But a lot of the larger field sizes, the lack of fence rows and that type of cover, unfortunately, is where quail really thrived, and so that makes it tough. We still work on them. We're still trying. I'm very passionate about quail. Had a bird dog for many years chasing quail, so I love quail, but it's tough.
Madam Chairman, can I have a follow-up there?
Of course.
And I'm glad to hear that because, a lot of people, I'm just glad to hear they're not poaching them or shooting them all the time. And, not that I'm glad that we don't have the quail that we used to, but I'm glad to hear why we don't when people ask me about it. But you've done an excellent job on turkey, deer, elk, and the bear that you didn't put in there. We've got plenty of them, too. If any of my fellow colleagues here would like to have some bear, we've got plenty.
Representative Moore.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for this presentation today. Really encouraged by reading about the crew member training you've been doing, the burn boss training you've been doing to make sure we have the workforce here in Kentucky to handle those prescribed burns that we need to have. My question is for that training. Have you all started building in ways to review your training, update training on certain bases to make sure that what is taught in 2018 isn't necessarily the same thing that's going to be taught in 2028 to kind of learn lessons and make sure we're advancing and getting better at it as we go?
Yeah, great question, and yes, we're always evaluating our training programs and our training models with the most current science that's available out there. And that's the thing about the Fire Council. The Fire Council it's purely volunteer run right now, and I shouldn't say that's a good thing. I'll touch on that maybe a little bit more later of kind of what I would love to see with that. But it is ran by fire practitioners and professionals who do fire all the time. So a combination of the most current research and that experience from the field with those practitioners is always built into those trainings.
Thank you.
Representative Baker.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you guys for being here. I appreciate the presentation. You talked about some of the challenges that you face, and one specific thing that you talked about was raising awareness and landowners. What role can we play? How can we come alongside you and help in that regard?
Yeah, that's very appreciative, first of all. You all reach a lot of folks, and you have a lot of constituents that you deal with. So any chance you get to just push them towards the Prescribed Fire Council website for starters. It's a wealth of information there, and that may open the door for them to get interested and learn about some of the training opportunities that are available. I guess I can make a shameless plug for the Fire Council right now, and I did mention, the Fire Council it's volunteer run right now, and so we're at capacity with what we can accomplish, at the Fire Council. Everybody that serves in leadership positions on the Fire Council have other jobs. They have day jobs that take priority, and right now there's no dedicated funding source for the Fire Council either. It's really whatever we can generate through dues, whatever we can generate through some trainings that we do. So getting creative and finding maybe a creative funding stream to help stand up and support the Kentucky Prescribed Fire Council could potentially go a long way at increasing fire capacity in Kentucky.
And could I do a quick follow-up?
Of course.
Thank you on that. And if you could, any of that information that you have that you could push along to us to share,
absolutely,
that we can look into it further.
Yes.
We could perhaps talk afterwards as well.
Yeah, would love to.
Thank you.
Representative Baker, you read my mind on that, so I would like to offer just a little bit of follow-up as well. That's exactly why I wanted this presentation in front of this large committee, so we've got a lot of people that can go home and talk about this important topic in their own district. And talking about the Fire Council, that was one of my questions. It seems like probably the best time to go ahead and ask that, then we'll get back in queue. So is 510, if I remember the number from the slide correctly, you're saying that's about capacity for the Kentucky Fire Council?
No, that's what we've trained to date through one of those trainings. So you'll see that number continue to rise, but it'll be probably slow growth just because, again, we're limited by our capacity. Mm-hmm. Even the folks that are going out and doing these trainings, and like I said, a lot of them are done on Saturday mornings. So it's folks with other departments, with other agencies that have other jobs. So we're really limited in our capacity. And kind of talking about a dedicated funding stream, I think that's what a lot of that funding could be used for, is to hire staff. And once you get some paid staff on board,
Gotcha.
I could really see it going to the next level.
Okay. I did have a couple of questions about the Kentucky Fire Council, so I think you answered it with Representative Baker's question. I was going to ask, how does someone contact or show interest? So there is a website?
There is, yes.
You just
So
Google search or just...
Do a Google search. I can't tell you off the top of my head what it is, but if you do a Google search for Kentucky Prescribed Fire Council, you're going to get it's going to bring it right there.
Okay,
Yep.
very good. And then just so anyone potentially interested, how often do they meet? What is the meeting frequency? What kind of time investment would somebody be probably asked to give?
Sure. There's actually just right now one annual meeting for the Kentucky Prescribed Fire Council. But then these trainings are just at a variety of times around the state, really, whenever we kind of see a need, whenever there's interest. I'm not sure if there's a actual schedule of events or when they come up, but it's really kind of as needed, and we try to get as many out there as we can.
Excellent. We'll get back in queue. Senator Yates.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, each of you, for your presentation. The Commissioner and both directors have done a good job answering some of these questions going through. I just recently got back from visiting my wife's family in Maui and Lahaina, and after what they went through with the fires was devastating, but to watch some of the controlled burns and all the volunteers come out, and I think the key was they always have the right equipment. If you're a volunteer, they have the best equipment set up, and so they'll block off the road and they'll make sure that hillside is kind of taken care of. And so watching this brought back some of that. And obviously the necessity of, as long as you provide the workforce with everything they need, it makes it a whole lot easier to volunteer to show up and get out. And so hopefully we'll make sure that if we do a funding source, that we can do that as well, because last thing we want is put anybody in danger, like we've seen in other places. When I was a kid, my grandfather, who served in the legislature for 22 years, we pretended to be farmers, and we tried to do a controlled burn, and it got completely out of hand. Fire department showed up, and everything into it. And so I do think that it made sense that we lay out what is expected. And you mentioned earlier about liability protection, and of course the attorney in me worries me because I never want to pass that burden to our moms and pops or constituents. But I think what you meant to clarify was that you meant that someone doing it was fully insured, not that if they were negligent, they would be held accountable for breach of that standard. But just make sure there's insurance there so people aren't hurt. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Representative Pollock.
Commissioner Storm, always good to see you. Appreciate your transparency on bringing good information, your leadership, and what you guys are doing. Just a couple comments, Madam Chair. Thank you. One is Senator Wheeler. I've got dear friends who live in California. And to answer your question, yes, these prescribed controlled fires that they did at one time helped control wildfires out there. That's their words on that, but yeah, that's something that was obviously help in preventing. I am a farm owner, about 30 acres. Yes, Senator Yates, I'm pretend farmer. So I want to give a shout out to Chris Mason, who is a local, works with the Department of Forestry, Soil Conservation. He's my right-hand guy who I go to ask and get his feedback on. But I guess my question is there a certain time of the year, or is it just the conditions to go ahead and schedule maybe? I've got about 10 acres that I really, and he and I are working together to find that time to burn that down. And one other quick comment, Commissioner, from an insurance, I got my insurance hat on, but yeah, deer, we're stocked in Kentucky with deer due to the comprehensive claims of hitting those deer. So, but yeah, is there a certain time of the year for these controlled or prescribed fires?
Yeah, so appreciate the compliment of Chris Mason. He works for the Department of Fish and Wildlife, a longtime biologist, and he's one of our best and brightest. So you're fortunate to get to work with him. And yes, there are different times for different objectives, depending on what you're trying to achieve. A lot of times when you're just really trying to clear out brush, clear out, burn off fields, things like that, we've kind of got a window in that January, February, March, April time frame when conditions are right. And so much of it's driven by weather, obviously. You have to get the right weather. But then depending on other objectives, if you're trying to burn in your forest, you're trying to eliminate some of these competitive species and things like that. Sometimes we'll see burns at different times of the year during growing seasons and things like that. But typically, our most typical window in Kentucky for fire is probably kind of February, March.
So, Madam Chair, one more quick comment, but I guess to follow up with Representative Baker, I highly encourage my colleagues here to reach out to those Fish and Wildlife, Forestry, Soil Conservation folks. There are a ton of information and resources that are available there locally. So, thank you.
Representative Marzian.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for a wonderful presentation. I'm a city girl, so we didn't have many fires except in the fireplace. But a couple things you talked about is your fire commission or your fire council is totally volunteer, which I think could be a big problem because volunteers are sometimes hard to gather, or they're busy, and we need more professional folks, I think. And you said a funding stream. What are you looking at? What kind of money? And the budget people are meeting right now, so you might want to get some money and ask through your chair, who's so competent here, or through somebody.
Sure, absolutely. I don't have an exact number in mind. Since we have nothing right now, I think we'd welcome anything, but it really wouldn't be a huge ask if you could get in that probably $500,000 to $1 million range. I think you could really stand something up pretty good with that.
I think you'd have a lot of support on this committee, so thank you for that.
Representative Pfister.
I want to thank you all for coming in with this subject today. I actually burned a couple of brush piles last week myself on my farm, and have been involved with some of these starting back in the 90s when we were getting rid of fescue and doing the warm season grasses and that kind of thing. My question, though, is do you have any specifics that you want in a bill, or specific asks that you have that we can work with? I'm behind you on a general basis, but I need some more information.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Short answer, no, probably not yet. Really wanted to just kind of make you aware of prescribed fire in general and some of the roadblocks and shortcomings right now, but would welcome conversation on that as we dig into it a little more and kind of compare other states to how they handle this.
I'd like to be part of that if I could.
Thank you.
May I add, Representative Pfister, there's a public health component to this too, and in this day and age, I guess I wouldn't ask you how many of you have had tick-borne illness, but I can say our agency, I've walked in a room before and we've had a conversation, and just about everybody in the room has had or does have tick-borne illness. And so there's a public health benefit to this as well. If you can burn places that have a high prevalence of ticks. And there was recently a WKYT article that I read, and I think some of the bluegrass region had like a 40% prevalence of, I think it was Lyme, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a big benefit there for all people.
Senator Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just appreciate you guys today and talking about this and understanding, and I want to go back to the quail issue, because my dad, my whole life, raised bird dogs, and we were big quail hunters. And of course, the disappearance of the quail here in Kentucky, and that's been a real concern. And of course, when you do prescribe burns, you're burning their habitats. And I know that you're talking about development and everything else, but what about predators? What about the bobcats? What about hawks, which are protected? You know, because I think that's a lot of the reason too as well.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, when you're talking quail, they're at the bottom of the food chain. You know, everything's after a quail, and that's one of the biggest challenges. But so fire creates the habitat that quail need. It creates that optimal habitat, which is, quail are affectionately known as the firebird for a reason, because they love fire so much. And that's part of the reason that a lot of these southern states burn so much, because they still have robust quail populations, and they're burning on their quail plantations and having a lot of success with that. You know, what we're seeing as far as a lot of the predators, some that we may be able to control, others you can't, you know, the federally protected species. When you put the habitat in place and you put enough of it in place, you're stacking the odds in the favor of the bird or the animal. And that's really what we're trying to do.
And I do have a quick add-in to that as well. Years ago, when maybe our great-grandfathers settled a lot of the land in Kentucky, they necessarily harvested timber. It was firewood, it was a multitude of things. Now we live in a time where we harvest only the desirable timber. So we leave a mature forest standing, but we took the desirable traits out of that forest. And that also has been devastating to small game, because we don't have that succession in the forest. And in a perfect scenario, like they'll do in Wisconsin, you'll have a 3-phase timber plan. And so you always have an immature forest, which is really thick. It's briars. We don't want to walk through it. Right. And where we've had minimal success oftentimes have been tornadoes, big storms that take down big chunks of timber, because it creates habitat for grouse and quail. And so that's an add-in. And then the prevalence of predators in my lifetime, I don't remember seeing a coyote as a child. And we see them all the time. We see cats, avian predators. And so, Ben's point, they are at the bottom of the food chain. It's going to be difficult to change things, but we're talking about culturally, we have to change the way people manage land to bring that back.
Thank you.
Any other questions from members? I knew this was going to be a fascinating topic. This is the longest queue of questions I have had in my tenure of having the honor of chairing this committee. But I still do have a couple that members didn't directly touch on. You mentioned some southern states that do a little bit more of the prescribed burn. How do we compare to those? And then I do have a follow-up. I mean, we would need to do twice as much to be kind of on the same par as a comparative state?
Yeah, great question. So on average, Kentucky's probably around 12 to 15,000 acres a year that we burn. Obviously, it's very weather dependent on those numbers. Sometimes we go well above that, sometimes well below. When you look at those southern states that I referenced, they're regularly over 1 million acres that they burn.
Oh, wow. It's a big difference. Yeah. And then my follow-up question to that question is, how does a layperson know it is a fire that needs to be reported or it's one that is under control? You know, we ask the public, if you see something, say something. If you're driving down the road and you see a fire, how would that person know whether to report it or not?
You know, they probably won't unless a lot of fires, a lot of our crews actually have signs that they'll put up on the road that say prescribed fire, do not report. But for those that don't, I would still encourage folks to go ahead and call them in and report them, because it's really the burn boss's responsibility. They should be calling dispatch ahead of the fire anyway, and it's dispatch's responsibility then to send somebody or not send somebody based on what's been reported.
Very good. And you mentioned the burn bosses. That is my final two questions. I think you mentioned we have 187 in Kentucky now. I was just wondering how they're placed geographically. Do we have spots that we need more participation, mostly in one area? How geographically do they line out?
You know, I'm not sure I can answer that right now. I'd be glad to get back with you on a map of where they're all at. But we have burn bosses spread all across the state, probably heavier towards the central part of the state, just because that's where most of our folks are and where a lot of our trainings are held. But there's burn bosses distributed all across Kentucky.
Oh, very good. You know, this committee and really the entire General Assembly is so interested in really developing outdoor recreation in our beautiful eastern Kentucky, and I just wanted to make sure we had some, burn bosses in that area as well. And final question, you mentioned the federal funding. What is preventing Kentucky from taking better advantage of that? Does it require some type of state match to draw that money down? We're just not applying? What is the barrier for us?
Yeah, so the federal funding that I referenced was really through the federal farm bill. So it's not necessarily anything that us as an agency or agencies would apply for. It's really, that's directed directly to the landowners, through farm bill programs like EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, and things like that. So some of those programs have fire built in as a management tool. The real issue there is landowners aren't able to take advantage of it because they're not able to burn, whether maybe they're not trained, or maybe they're elderly, maybe they're not physically capable of going out and burning, and we don't have that contractor base there to send out and actually do the burning for them. So many times a lot of these contracts, like through EQIP, they just don't get fire even written in them because there's no reason to write it in when they know they can't accomplish it.
Very good. Thank you for that explanation. One final question, Co-Chair Wheeler.
Thank you, Chairman King. And this is to follow up a little bit on some of Chairman King's last questions when she asked you one that kind of brought a thought to my mind. I mean, have you all attempted to maybe go through some of the volunteer fire departments? I know they're always a little bit short of funds. To either recruit people or to bring more income into the volunteer firehouses. I mean, it seems to me on some level this would be a natural place for recruitment, I guess, for these types of folks.
Absolutely, yes. That's really what we consider a low-hanging fruit, a lot of those folks, because they've got some training, mostly structural training, but they're very interested, we've found out, in learning more about how to deal with, prescribed fire and how to implement prescribed fire. And Mr. Stewart, who's behind me that I introduced earlier, has actually hosted some of these learning burns on his own farm in Mercer County, and has had some volunteer firemen, local fire chiefs and whatnot come out on those learning burns to learn how to burn. So yeah, we're trying to get into that, crack that opportunity as well.
Okay, would some of these grants be available to those departments if they kind of chose to go down that path as to participate in these programs?
Not necessarily the funding that Representative King and I were just discussing. That's more of landowner-based type funding, but we could certainly investigate and see if there's there could be some grants to help stand up these fire departments and get the right equipment and things like that.
Would a landowner, for example, maybe be able to apply for the grant and then, pay the volunteer fire department to do these types of burns and
Possibly.
kind of a partnership type agreement?
Yeah, I think you're kind of going in the direction where I was hinting around, like the contractors and creating the contractor base, and that's essentially what we see happening. The volunteer fire departments could serve in that contractor role. Landowner accepts the payment through the Farm Bill program and then passes it on to the contractor or the fire department. So, yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much.
Final call for questions. I think we all agree this is a fascinating subject and really does help Kentucky to make sure we're doing this and doing it properly. My sincere thanks for the presenters. We've been talking again about this for several months. You all have done a stellar job getting the information and the illustrations together so we can better understand the great work that you all do. Thank you again for taking your time to be with us today. Committee, our next meeting is August the 28th, 1 p.m. in Annex Room 149. If there are no other comments,